My special enjoyment in these Father's Days with you is that they have pushed me to study even the most familiar things that Jesus has said, because I want to talk from the heart to you about why I've made in Scripture from Christ, the quotations from Christ in the Sermon on the Mount, the path I want to follow. Not really to get to heaven, but to enjoy peace on earth. On this day, each year, I've tried to look at those words through the prism of fatherhood. What can we fathers, so blessed with that role, do to project to our children the love, the compassion, the guidance, the concern that Jesus showed for all children, including us? Today's topic is an example. Among devout Christians, there are a few things in the Bible more familiar than the beautifully, almost mysteriously phrased Beatitudes. The lead-off promises in the Sermon on the Mount. The 8 simple sentences that start with, "Blessed are." You heard them read a few minutes ago. You know them, but do you? You've heard them. The poor in spirit, the meek, the pure in heart. What's he saying? Who's he talking about? Inherit the earth. One more question. Do you know the Beatitudes, as beloved as they are, probably weren't meant for people like us to hear? Beatitudes are almost the first red-colored words in many Bibles, the words directly attributed to Jesus. My key words. Matthew gets Jesus into adulthood through his baptism by John, his test in the wilderness, his brief residency in Capernaum, and then says, from that time on, Jesus began to preach. Beatitudes came just 9 short paragraphs later. 5 of those 9 paragraphs involve the recruiting of the original 4 disciples. Brothers Simon, the man we know as Peter, and Andrew, and brothers James and John, all of them straight off fishing boats. From Matthew 4, Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and preaching the good news of the kingdom and healing every disease and sickness among the people. The news about it spread all over Syria. And very soon, Matthew says, there followed him large crowds from Galilee, from the Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and the region across the Jordan. 20th century novelist Pearl Buck, in her book called The Bible Story, paraphrases Mark's account, saying, at last it became obvious that he could not do his work without others to help him, not only with his preaching, but his healing. Many men followed him, men who called themselves disciples, because they believed in him and loved him. But of them all, he had chosen only 4 to do his work. He knew now that he would have to make a further choice. So after a night in the mountain, alone in prayer, Buck writes that Jesus called all his disciples to him and named the 12 whom he had chosen to be his apostles, to be with him when they could help by being near, and to be sent out at other times to preach in the many places he would not be able to reach alone. He was preparing them, the message is very clear, to carry on what he had started, to carry it on after what he knew was coming, his own violent death. Filling out the 12, Buck quotes from Mark, were Philip and his friend Bartholomew, who was also called Nathaniel, Thomas, and Matthew, who had been a publican, tax collector. Another James, the son of Alphaeus. Another Simon, who was a Canaanite. Judas, also called Thaddeus, who was the brother of the second James. And Judas Iscariot, who became a traitor. These are the men known as the 12 disciples. That moment of selection, that moment of picking the team, cutting to the varsity, was their first time together. Think of the historic magnitude of that moment. Christ's days on earth were down to a relative few. Excuse me. Accepting Judas the job of, in effect, building Christianity. Spreading the gospel was handed to this tiny band. These very special, very strong believers. And as the song Faith of Our Fathers says, in spite of dungeon, fire, and sword, they did their job wonderfully well, invaluably well. Pearl Buck says, when Jesus came down the mountain with the chosen 12, he once again saw crowds of people waiting for him. But he decided he would wait no longer to teach his disciples all he could. Went up into the mountain again with the chosen 12. There he seated himself and began to speak to the 12, though the crowd moved in around them. He was talking directly to his selected 12, giving them the message he wanted them thenceforth to convey in his name when he began, "Know this and remember always. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." That's just 95 words, opening what we know as the Sermon on the Mount. Each of us dads probably got cards today carrying more than 95 words. In fact, a friend of mine with whom I discussed this topic thought about that and said those 95 lyrical and succinct Beatitudes may have been Christ's own hallmark message for fathers. Way back in the year 394 AD, St. Augustine thought so much of those 95 words that he tried to explain them with 2,653 of his own. St. Augustine considered blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, to be the perfect start for what Christ wanted those disciples to preach. Humility, he felt, was the very first quality that Christ sought in those who wanted to follow the message. And Augustine wrote, "The poor in spirit are rightly understood here as meaning the humble and God-fearing. Nor ought blessedness to begin at any other point. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Pride is the beginning of all sin. Let the proud, therefore, seek after and love the kingdoms of the earth. But blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of